It is May 24th, 1973, and a tornado forms just west of Union City, Oklahoma. The tornado causes weak sporadic damage as it damages multiple crops. The tornado is now entering the bearings and or outskirts of the town of Union City. Union City presented itself as a small, little rural town in just near south central Oklahoma. This storm would go on to produce a family of tornadoes that would extend for far distances, I would say. Anyway, the tornado was quickly bearing down on town. Multiple trees were destroyed and or shredded. Homes, well, let's just say some didn't exist anymore. And they were flattened down so badly that some homes didn't even have a top part left, and cars were thrown considerably far distances. And the cone tornado was entering town, and the Doppler Radar, the first of its kind, was forming outside of town, or I would say putting up a formation line. And this Doppler radar was scanning the circulation and found out that this was actually the very first radar to scan a tornado and or confirm one. At this point, the tornado was quickly heading towards town until it would travel to the northeast, following a quite shaky path. The tornado damaged or destroyed up to 35 homes or more. 18 mobile homes were flipped and or destroyed. Multiple well-constructed homes were flattened down to their bare slabs, and cars were mangled beyond recognition. Some were found twisted around steel poles or electrical transmission lines. The tornado was growing in size more than any on the planet Earth, and this cone was finally getting even stronger than it was. The tornado grew to its max width of 300 yards, and this was a dangerous situation unfolding. And supplies proved to be quintessential for this tornado. And even though it was a small tornado, the fairly compact circulation was ripping homes to pieces. And the main core was passing to the west, and this circulation was persisting for quite a distance, and this tornado was getting violent, very, very violent, and everything in its path was ripped apart. Here you can see the tornado on radar, with the circulation being shown. And the tornado was interesting in a few ways. For one, it was traveling in a north-northeast direction in a way, mostly going to the east. It also followed a very shaky and erratic path. It changed directions at least one or two times. The circulation was getting faster and stronger as it was bearing down the small community. And just to the north, the city of El Reno was nestling in. And when they got word of the tornado, they thought it was heading their way. However, the tornado followed a path close to a tornado that would happen 7 years later, the 1980 Grand Island F4. However, that will be a story for another time. But right now, this small, thin tornado was tearing up the grasslands. And even though it had grown to its full width, it was shrinking. But the intensity was still violent enough to rip homes apart. And trees sustained extreme damage. The bright, beautiful cone tornado thankfully killed less than 10. But sadly, even though they killed less than 10, 2 people would lose their lives. And yes, 2 is just too many. Anyhow, this tornado was very photogenic, never rain-wrapped, Well, I wouldn't exactly say that because it had a rain-wrapped phase for about 5 brief minutes. Anyway, the circulation had a multi-vortex core, and as the tornado persisted, it was slowly losing its bearings. And the animation you are witnessing is the tornado's path. It did briefly change directions. However, that doesn't really matter considering the tornado was very, very violent. The National Weather Service had already issued warnings for the following days, but this circulation did eventually die off after traveling roughly 17.29 kilometers, or just above or under 10 miles. The circulation was dying off, but the intensity was not, actually, because every home that was touched was scraped off the face of this earth, never to be seen again. The cleanup efforts were not impeded by anything. However, downed power lines caused a bit of a rough patch. Many homes thankfully did not lose any of their basements, but some foundations were destroyed. And the full life cycle of this tornado was heavily documented by the NSSL in Norman, Oklahoma. And when the radar scanned the tornado, it showed a bright velocity couplet, red and green. This was the very first time a tornado was spotted on radar using either reflectivity or velocity-based high-res velocity, to be exact. The Doppler and wheels radar would be essential for many years to come. However, Dr. Ted Fujita came in days later and surveyed the tornado, officially rating it as an F4. The winds were estimated to be at least upwards of 280 miles an hour, making it a likely F5 candidate. But that is for another story. The circulation was dying off, but it still had a little bit of a punch left to pack. And the circulation was shaky in its movements. It was moving at roughly 60 miles an hour to the east. And this tornado had immense fury in its core. But that doesn't really matter because this was a literal meteorological trophy, I should say, because it was proved to be a worthy study because the Doppler radar was being invented, and the first actual vehicle wouldn't come out until 1994, or otherwise 21 years later. This tornado was likely the strongest of its kind, and it's unmistakably violent. However, it would likely sustain its immense strength on the northeast side of town, but the tornado was a little bit overshadowed by the 2013 El Reno Union City EF3. This circulation was just terrifying. For most people, it was it was horrifying to witness. However, most people will agree with them, but it's not going to hide the positive takeaways from this event. Days after the tornado, many came in to help and find any bodies or debris left behind. The homes were rebuilt in Union City, and that was a great thing because everyone had their hearts set on something, putting lives back together. However, 2 lives could not be fixed because they were already taken. The circulation was dying off, and just shortly after 4 p.m., the circulation would die off after traveling a total of roughly 11 miles. This absolutely violent monster was swaying left and right. But even though it wasn't anticyclonic, it was still very beautiful. And this circulation was no more. but the power it had was unmistakably violent. And after the tornado passed, no impeding efforts were seen. Everyone was picking up the debris left behind from this absolute monster. It was an angry beast with a multi-vortex core. The tornado was only rain-wrapped for a little bit of its life, before it would then fade off into nothing. The National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma, banded together with Dr. Ted Fujita and assigned the formal rating of a high-end F4. Winds estimated near 260 miles an hour. However, that was a serious underestimate. This tornado would die off after traveling 11 miles, sadly taking the lives of 2 people. And as the circulation died off, many came quickly to the help and be aid of the people of Union City. This was the most devastating tornado near Grady County, Oklahoma, until 1999. This was the most strongest tornado in years. And this tornado was not overshadowed, but that's likely an underestimate. However, in 1971, just 2 years prior, a family of tornadoes would occur down south in Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. But that was very overshadowed. However, we'll cover that in the next video. But to wrap it up, most people agree with the fact that this was devastating. And while that's not a lie, there's many positive takeaways, but if you ask someone what they thought of this, they'd think it'd be horrifying. However, I would like to say that this was quite literally the monster EF4 or F4.